James Carter had always been a man of quiet strength. Standing tall with broad shoulders and a calm demeanor, he carried himself with an air of dignity that made people stop and take notice. James was a family man, deeply devoted to his wife, Angela, and their 2 kids, Mia and Joshua. Born and raised in a small town in Georgia, he had worked hard to make something of himself, serving in law enforcement for over 20 years. Recently, he'd been promoted to chief of police in the bustling city of Riverview, a position he had dreamed of his whole life. But James wasn't the kind of person who flaunted his authority. To him, leadership was about humility, service, and fairness. Even as chief, he often drove himself to work in his old pickup truck, wearing plain clothes instead of his uniform. He believed that true respect came not from titles but from actions. It was a cool Monday morning when James decided to grab a coffee before heading to the station. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the quiet streets of Riverview. James pulled into a small cafe, parked his truck, and walked in. He greeted the barista, a young woman named Carla, with a warm smile. "Morning, Carla." "Just the usual, please," he said. As he waited for his coffee, James noticed a commotion outside. A white police officer, Officer Ryan Hendricks, was yelling at a man standing near the curb. The man, a black delivery driver named Marcus Green, looked confused and scared. Ryan Hendricks was known around the department for his short temper and aggressive behavior. He had been with the force for 5 years, but his record was riddled with complaints of misconduct. On this particular morning, Ryan had pulled over Marcus, claiming his delivery van was parked illegally. "Step away from the vehicle." Ryan barked, his hand hovering near his holster. Marcus raised his hands, his voice trembling. "Officer, I'm just delivering packages. I didn't realize I was in a no-parking zone. I'll move it right now." But Ryan wasn't listening. He had already decided that Marcus was guilty of something. Maybe it was the way Marcus was dressed in a hoodie and jeans, or maybe it was something else. Whatever it was, Ryan's bias was taking over. James stepped out of the cafe, coffee in hand, and watched the scene unfold. He didn't want to intervene too quickly, hoping Ryan would de-escalate the situation. But as Ryan's voice grew louder and more hostile, James knew he couldn't stand by any longer. "Excuse me, officer," James called out, his voice calm but firm. Ryan turned to see James walking toward him. "Stay out of this, sir," he snapped. "This is police business." James stopped a few feet away, keeping his tone steady. "I can see that. But I think there's been a misunderstanding here. This man is just doing his job." Ryan's face turned red with anger. He didn't recognize James, who wasn't wearing his uniform or badge. To him, James was just another civilian trying to interfere. "I said, step back," Ryan shouted, his hand now gripping his gun. The tension in the air was palpable. Marcus looked between the 2 men, fear etched on his face. James remained calm, raising his hands slightly to show he meant no harm. "Officer, I'm not here to cause trouble," James said. "But you need to lower your weapon. Let's handle this like professionals." Ryan's eyes narrowed. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by someone he assumed had no authority. Without warning, he stepped forward and shoved James in the chest. "You don't tell me what to do," Ryan yelled. James stumbled back but didn't retaliate. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his badge. Holding it up for Ryan to see, he said, "My name is James Carter. I'm the new chief of police for Riverview." The color drained from Ryan's face. His hand fell away from his gun as he stared at the badge in disbelief. "See, Chief?" he stammered. James nodded, his expression serious. "Yes, Officer Hendricks, and you've just made a grave mistake." The street had grown silent. Marcus lowered his hands, relief washing over him. A few bystanders who had gathered to watch the commotion whispered among themselves, realizing who James was. Ryan stepped back, his confidence crumbling. I didn't know, sir." James cut him off. "That's the problem, officer. You didn't take the time to know. You saw a man and made assumptions based on how he looked. Is this how you treat the people you're supposed to protect and serve?" Ryan tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. That he knew there was no excuse for his actions. James turned to Marcus and said, "Are you okay?" Marcus nodded, his voice still shaky. "Yes, sir. Thank you." James looked back at Ryan. "You're lucky this didn't end worse than it did, but there will be consequences for your behavior. Report to my office first thing tomorrow morning." Ryan nodded silently, shame written all over his face. James watched as the officer walked away, his head hung low. As the crowd began to disperse, James placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. This isn't what our department stands for, and I promise to make it right." Marcus smiled weakly. "Thank you, Chief. It means a lot." James nodded, then walked back to his truck. As he drove to the station, he couldn't help but think about the work that still needed to be done. Being chief of police wasn't just about enforcing the law, it was about changing a culture, one step at a time. And James Carter was ready for the challenge. And that's the story, guys. I hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I did in creating it. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new adventure. And if you really loved it, share this story with your friends and family. Let's spread the word together. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep exploring. Hope to see you soon. Bye.